So I'm really honoured to be joined by Stella Assange, the partner, of course, of Julian Assange, who has faced huge persecution because of his exposure of war crimes by the United States in particular. Stella, it's a big honour for you to join us. Welcome.
Thanks, Owen. It's wonderful to be here.
Can you just explain exactly what is the plight of Julian Assange? There's a lot happening in the world, huge amounts of tumult going on. Could you just kind of sum up what's the state of play regarding Julian?
Well, Julian's situation, the case against him, is really defining of our times. What has been done to Julian is basically a reflection of what is being done to our civil liberties, to our right to know, to our democracy. Julian has been in Belmarsh High Security Prison for 3.5 years. He's not serving a sentence. He is there because the United States has issued an extradition order for him. And it's issued this extradition order through a profoundly flawed piece of legislation, which was introduced in the aftermath of the War on Terror, which basically fast-tracked extraditions. And he has extremely minimal ability to withstand, to resist the extradition. Technical grounds for extradition. Technical grounds to resist the extradition. And so he's really fighting for his life. And this is a political case. And many people might not know this, but extraditions are 90% politics and just 10% law. So Julian is facing 175 years in a US prison, essentially because he embarrassed the United States by publishing evidence that it was committing war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere. So the extradition against him is in relation to Wikileaks publication of information about the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, the torture prison in Guantanamo Bay, and the diplomatic cables, which also exposed torture, corruption, grave human rights abuses.
Why is it so important before I talk about the impact on him and you, by the way, and also what people can do to support, because there's a very important action coming up this Saturday, just explain, what was it about what he revealed that made it so important? And why should everyone, whatever they think about Julian Assange, whatever they think about the revelations, why is it important as a point of principle to support what he did and what he revealed?
Well, look, the United States has brought this case against Julian. It brought it under the Trump administration. And he is being punished because of the most important work that Wikileaks has ever done, which is to reveal the gravest possible crimes, which are state-sponsored crimes and cover-ups of those crimes. WikiLeaks published evidence of 15,000 individual civilian deaths that had not been accounted for. You see, during the Iraq and Afghan war, many of your viewers might not, remember this, but there was a huge fog of war. The way the wars were being reported on was through so-called embedded journalists who went, embedded with the military, and who, there's a selection process already in that process, and you simply had no idea what was going on in the war. It was just year after year, and the US said they were winning the war. Of course, you just look at what happened in Afghanistan. It lasted 20 years. There's a video of Julian that went viral that said that the goal is not to have a successful war. It is to have an endless war. And that is essentially what was going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. The carnage was absolutely immeasurable. But this is the first time that we got kind of an anatomy of those wars amid what had been a lot of propaganda about those wars that we were paying for, and that many British soldiers lost their lives in. So and American. So one of the most kind of iconic revelations was the so-called collateral murder video, which showed how a number of civilians in Iraq, including two journalists from Reuters, were gunned down from a helicopter. And it also revealed what is clearly a war crime, which is a Good Samaritan who saw that there was a dying man on the pavement who was, crawling to safety, severely injured. And this Good Samaritan who was driving a van, he was taking his children to school, stopped the car and attempted to pick up the severely injured man, to take him in the van and drive him to a hospital, presumably. And what happened then? Well, you see from this video, from the perspective of the helicopter, how he himself is then gunned down. And in fact, that his children actually survived, but only because he threw his body over them and protected them from the bullets. They were also severely injured, but they survived. So this is, of course, hugely embarrassing to the United States, because none of the crimes that were revealed, none of the killings, and there were documented many instances of the US violating the rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, the laws against torture, and so on. None of those have been prosecuted. Instead, they have taken an outrageous case against Julian, who is not a US citizen. He's an Australian who was invited to the UK to work on the publications, to publish from here. And it is an attack on press freedom, but it is also an attack on attempts to bring accountability for state-sponsored crimes and state-sponsored and state cover-ups.
Can you explain the impact on Julian Assange as a human being, what he's actually gone through over the last few years, given essentially because of all the things you've just said, the things he revealed, which caused huge embarrassment to the US establishment? What's been the impact on him as a human being of these years of incarceration, and before that, de facto being under house arrest at the Ecuador embassy?
Well, Julian, he's a public figure, so people maybe they forget that he's a human being. And I know Julian, obviously, as my other half, the man I love the most in this world, and he is suffering profoundly. He has been punished for doing good, essentially, for doing what he can to help victims of gross abuse to get their victimhood recognized, basically, for doing the things that we're supposed to do to keep our government in check. So he was just doing his job, and then he's been persecuted as a result of it. And there's been a concerted effort to attack his reputation and to try to, not just as retaliation, but attack his reputation so as to facilitate his incarceration. And that is what happens in tyrannical authoritarian states with dissidents. They silence them, and they also try to reduce their impact by attacking their character, by casting doubt over their motivations, and so on. And the low point of this was immediately before his arrest. And I mean, we can go into that, but your question was about how he's doing. Well, he's struggling profoundly. You can just imagine what it's like. I mean, you can't. No one can, except those who have been in Belmarsh prison. But it is dehumanizing. It is the whole process of being in prison is about trying to, in a way, humiliate you and to try to remove your sense of self. It is a grim place where I think Belmarsh is the prison with the highest rates of suicide. And that's partly because it is such a grim place. And he's been there for 3.5 years. He's fighting his case from there. He's not serving a sentence. And, as part of his extradition There have been medical experts who have been examining him and so on, and they say that, you know, Julian, his life is at severe risk. He has suffered for years and years, and his life and his mental health and physical health are in increasing decline as time goes by. And if he is extradited, he will be driven to take his own life. And that is the conclusion that the medical experts have reached. But just imagine for any person to go through what Julian has gone through and continues to have to suffer because of this political persecution against him that has been allowed to unfold.
What's the impact on you?
Well, it's, you know, we have two children. They're 3 years old and 5 years old. And obviously, I was speaking to someone yesterday, actually, and they said, well, is there any justice if you win this? And there is no justice achievable, because years of our lives, and of course, Julian is the person who is suffering the most. And I'm loath to actually complain about how I'm doing, because, Julian's in a prison cell for at least 20 hours a day, and he only gets to see me and the kids maybe once or twice a week. And I'm okay. I'm speaking to you. I'm able to speak. He's silenced, and I'm able to eat whatever I want within reason, and I have some kind of autonomy over what I do every day. But I'm suffering because of how Julian is suffering, and this endless, indefinite, profound suffering that he is being subjected to. Because when they do that to someone you love, it's like they're doing it to you. And I'm fighting for him, and this is what keeps me going, is that there is a fight. That I really think that Julian can be free, that he will be free, as long as there's enough awareness about what is being done to him and what has been done to him.
Finally, what I want to ask you about is something people can do. So this Saturday, which is the 8th of October, what's happening and what are you urging people to do?
Okay, so on Saturday at 1:00, we're going to form a human chain around Parliament. And this is the first time that it's been done. I was quite surprised about that, because, the Houses of Parliament globally are so iconic about as a symbol of democracy. And people have gotten used to maybe, through over the COVID period, maybe interacting too much online. And it's really important that this translates into people expressing themselves in real life. And so our plan is to surround Parliament on both sides of the Thames and cross the bridges, and show a profound symbol of human solidarity. Because really, Julian's case is about press freedom and justice and accountability, but at the basis of it is that there is a human being who is suffering, who has been punished for doing good, and whose life is at stake. And I have a profound faith in individual humanity, because I think that's the only thing that can really overcome what's wrong systemically. in our, in this country, and we have to reconnect as individuals, and for a good cause. And Julian has been the victim of a enormous persecution because he has angered all the powerful elements, from the warmongers to the corporations to the banks and so on. So, the common man and woman have to stand up for him, because if it was you, whoever's watching, Julian would stand up for you. And so I ask you to do the same for him, and for me, and for our kids.
Stella, thank you so much. That was such a moving explanation of exactly what Julian did, what he's up against as a consequence, what he's faced as a human being, and you obviously as well, your family. But as you say, this is about defending journalism. It's about being able to hold the powerful to account. The wars we go through, I say we, largely inflicted, of course, on people in poor countries who are bombed and brutalized, and that's able to happen precisely because the powerful hide the reality of war and the consequences on people. And what Julian Assange did is basically take the curtain aside and let people see war crimes committed in their name. So it's so important, this particular case. People across the political spectrum, if you believe in journalism, if you believe in the ability to hold the powerful to account, to defend truth, this is something you should support. So as many of you as possible, if you can make it on Saturday, the 8th of October, the first, I'm surprised too, the first surrounding of Parliament by Human Shield in history. Make sure you're there, spread the word. And Stella, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Owen. See you all there.